What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. We are your co-hosts today, Spencer and Chris. Gabe actually came down with the virus that shall not be named, and it looks like he might be out of commission for a little while. So it's just the two of us here to finish up our discussion of The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. If you missed part one to this discussion, feel free to go back and check that out. We talk about the magic system, world building, our favorite characters, and other general thoughts about the book and author. Today, we'll be wrapping up a couple favorite character things, as well as diving into our absolute favorite moments of the book, our favorite quotes, and maybe some theories if we have time, but I don't promise anything on that front. We will, however, have a dedicated King Killer theory discussion sometime in the future, possibly with a very special guest who is much more knowledgeable on the subject than either of us. But if you enjoy our content, I would ask that you please hit those like and subscribe buttons down below. It helps out the channel to get noticed by more people like you and helps us build a bigger and better community here at the Fantasy Files. If you'd like to be a part of that community, feel free to follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy, or just look up the Fantasy Files podcast in the search. With all that out of the way, I just want to talk really briefly about what we've been reading and watching this past week. So you were reading Pines, right? Are you still reading that?
I would be embarrassed if I was. No, I finished that like a week ago or so.
Right on.
It's a quick read, yeah.
Yeah. Without spoilers, yeah. What'd you think?
Well, so first of all, it was, I mean, well, first, I'll just say I really liked it. It was an entertaining read, and it was a much lighter read than Wise Man's Fear in a certain way. But I mean, it's also a dark book. It's not by any means like a light book, but it's quick, it's easy, it goes along at a fast pace. There's always something happening. So yeah, no spoilers, but I liked it. But actually, the author, was it Blake
Crouch?
Crouch? Yeah, Blake Crouch. I figured out that he also wrote a book I read years ago called Dark Matter.
Oh yeah.
Have you read that?
I haven't, but it's on my to be read list.
That's also a really fun, quick and easy read, just like this book. I think I like Dark Matter a little better, honestly.
Okay. Is Dark Matter the one about, I think there's like alternate timelines or time travel?
Like alternate dimensions, universes. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Okay.
About a physicist. That was a really good read. So just like this one, fast and easy, kind of a nice change from the heavy, deep Wise Man's Fear.
Yeah. After a 40-hour book.
Yes. It's nice to just get through one in like a week. I was like, wow, I'm still capable of it. Yeah. But now I'm on to Deadbeat Dresden Files.
Let's go.
Yeah, about 3 chapters into that. So
okay.
Yeah.
Right on. So what do you, I mean, I know you haven't gotten that far, but like what do you think of just like the overall tone that it's setting up there?
I like it so far. It's humorous. Like I can tell there's a lot of humor interjected, right? It seems like, yeah. So I liked that. I kind of like Harry's sort of, just kind of cavalier attitude. Just, it's I can tell that there's a lot of material in, because this is Deadbeat, so I know this isn't like the first book in the series, but
right.
You told me it's meant to kind of be
a jumping on point.
Jumping on point. Yeah. But I can tell there's a lot of material from previous books just by references and but so far there's nothing that's been like, I don't understand at all what you're saying. I mean, there's definitely references where I'm like, that's gotta be from a previous book. Like I'm like, there's gotta be a story to that.
Exactly.
For example, there's, he goes and visits his grave and he's like, yeah, some vampire noble built this grave for me. And it's just like an open grave with a headstone. He's like, I even have my own coffin on standby. And so I was like,
yeah.
I was like, dude, there's got to be a story to that.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so far I really like it. I'm intrigued. I'm
For sure
excited to keep reading it. So
yeah, I would say that there's nothing, as far as I can remember, because I just read it recently, reread Deadbeat recently.
Oh, okay.
And as far as I can remember, there's nothing that's gonna break the story for you, like the actual like story that you're reading. There's no other information that is gonna break that, as far as leaving you like, well, I don't understand this story because I don't know what happened before it. There will definitely be references to things that have happened in the past.
Sure.
And those will come up. And yeah, but I don't think there will be anything that will like completely make it unreadable for you.
No, okay.
Yeah, I'm super excited for you to read that. If you like it, then definitely go back to the previous books and kind of see what some of those are about. And yeah, but I think Deadbeat will do a really good job of kind of explaining the magic system and how everything kind of fits together and works in this world, because there's a lot of world building in Deadbeat.
Okay.
And so yeah, but if you have any questions about the magic system or like who's this character or whatever, let me know.
Okay. Yeah, I will. I mean, yeah, it's about time I read a Dresden Files book, right? So
yeah, we've been recommending it for so long.
I know.
Yeah, so this last week or two, I read The Broken Eye, which is the third book in the Lightbringer series.
Oh yeah, you're raving about that.
Yeah, is it? Yeah, I think it's the third book. It's either the third or the fourth. I forget now. I think it's the third. But oh my God, this is so good. And I don't think I liked it as much as the second book, which was my top three of last year. But it was really close behind it. Like it still had, like the first half of the book is kind of there's not a lot going on. It's just kind of building up the plot until you get to this final act where everything kind of explodes.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to get through that like first part of the book. But dude, once the action starts hitting, it just does not stop until the very final page. And there was a moment near the end of the book where I was driving and someone is being held in captivity and their friends have to come get them out. And it's like this kind of secret mission to like infiltrate and get them out. And I was literally like in my truck listening to this scene. And I was just like, go, just like yelling at this thing. And it was so intense. Just the way Brent Weeks writes his scenes like that, just fully engage the reader. And I was so hyped on that book.
Cool.
It makes me really excited to get back to the Night Angel trilogy from the same author. I think we're going to do that in sometime in March.
Is that the trilogy he wrote previously to Lightbringer, or?
Yeah. Okay. He wrote it previously to Lightbringer, and it's kind of a dark fantasy, grim dark trilogy about an assassin.
Okay.
And so it's like one of my favorite series of all time. And so reading the Lightbringer series, like I'm really enjoying Lightbringer, but another part of it just reminds me how much I liked Night Angel, and I'm like, I gotta go back and read Night Angel.
Read that again. Okay.
So I'm super excited for that. If we do that in March, gonna be looking for some other booktubers or any major fans of the series to join us for that for those 3 episodes. So yeah, like if anybody wants to join us for that and you're a big fan of Night Angel, please reach out because we would love to have you on the podcast. We would love to make those 3 episodes kind of an event. So definitely reach out to us. The other book that I have been reading this week and I still have not finished, I honestly think this is going to be the last time for a while that I read a 40-hour book. I am currently reading, I'm like 10 hours away from finishing The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan, which is the
Wheel of Time author, right?
Yeah, Wheel of Time. I think it's the 4th book.
Okay.
Yeah, 4th book. And man, it is just a lot, dude. It is a lot. And, there's so much in this book where I can see how this series really benefits from rereads, because my first time going through The Shadow Rising, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Mm-hmm. Like, I have no idea what is happening. And the first 3 books were not that way. Like the first 3 books, it was like pretty obvious what was happening. It was easy to follow. And this book, I'm just like, why are they doing this? Like, why is this group going here and this group is going there? Like, why is he in the woods trying to find himself? And like, I'm just like, I'm at a point now where it's getting better and I finally kind of understand what everybody is doing. But literally for the first like 20 hours of that book, I was just like, I have no clue what's happening.
Yeah.
And I think that if I had read it maybe a year ago, I would have DNF'd it. But the author up to this point for those first 3 books has I guess so much credit with those. Like I've built up such a like respect for the author, or like he's proven himself within those first 3 books that everything is going to pay off and that he is going to tell a good story. So that's the only reason why I sat through the first 15, 20 hours of this book. Cause I'm like, I know at some point it's going to make sense. If I just stick with it, it's going to land. And I'm finally getting to that point where it's starting to do that.
So it's all been worth it is what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't exactly know yet, because usually it's like the last like 5 chapters or so that really is like the big payoff, but I'm starting to see not the payoff, but like an understanding of where it's all kind of going, I think.
Okay. Right.
And so it's definitely getting better. Can we talk about some TV?
Sure.
Just real quick, I really want to tell you about Yellow Jackets, Chris.
Oh, I know.
Have you looked into this at all since I told you about it?
I haven't watched an episode yet. I've seen I watched the trailer and it looks interesting actually.
Yeah.
But yeah. I actually tried to cancel my Showtime and they were like, we'll give you 30 more days for free. And I was like,
really?
Fine. So yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Then you have no excuse not to watch Yellow Jackets.
Yeah, so I can start it.
So this past week, I started Yellow Jackets after Dexter kind of finished up. I was like, well, what do I watch now? Like, I have nothing to really, besides old Dexter. I'm like, I have nothing that I'm really watching. And I kept seeing advertisements for this Yellow Jackets series. And finally I was like, you know what? I really don't know what this show is about, but from the brief trailers that I've seen, it looks interesting. Oh man, dude, I finished, I think the first season is like 12 or 13 episodes, and I finished them all in 4 or 5 days.
Wow.
Dude, this show is so good, and I was not expecting it to be this good. Basically, for people who don't know, it's about a like a high school girls soccer team back in the 90s who got on a plane to go to nationals, and then they crash land in the Canada wilderness, like the mountains. And so they're stuck out there, and multiple people die from the crash, but you're left with this group of girls. I think there's about 15. And so you're left with the girls, the coach, and then his two assistants. And so there's like 3 guys and 15 girls.
Okay.
And each episode is split 50-50. And every other scene is the 90s with them surviving in the wilderness, and the present day with them all in wherever they live now, like LA or whatever. And so the interesting thing about that, though, is that the people that you follow in present day, there's like 3 girls.
Yeah.
And so you're left wondering
what
who
happened,
like how many people died. Are these all the girls that survived, or are these just the ones that we're seeing? And so they kind of reference like when, like in the present day, when they're all sitting down together, they say things like, have you talked to any of the others? And so we know that there's more people that have survived. And so I guess my point is, as the scenes are going back and forth, you're actively trying to figure out who is dead and who is not.
Interesting.
And then in the present day, there's also this really weird thing that's happening where some of the girls are like going crazy, like absolutely crazy. And then there's some people that are sending them postcards of that like Canada wilderness. And it's got like this weird, like tribal sign that they found out in the 90s. There was like a tribal sign on like the trees or something.
So you've got a modern day mystery as well then too. Oh,
yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so you're following both of these, and dude, it is just like, I don't know if I could say that it's like heart pounding action the whole time, but it is definitely like very, very intense the whole time. And it's very dark. Like it, right from the first episode, it basically tells you that these girls, while they were in the wilderness, we get like a little bit of a flash forward. And while they were in the wilderness, they had to like kill and eat each other. And so they're like cannibals. And since they've come back, like in present day, since they got rescued or whatever, they haven't told any of the news reporters what actually happened out there. And so that's kind of a big thing in the present day. Like people are actively kind of trying to investigate them and figure out what actually happened in the wilderness. And so anyways, man, it is a really, really good show. And when I got to that finale, I was like, dude, that was a banger. And I'm going to cancel, my Showtime as well, because I don't really have anything else that I want to watch on Showtime.
Yeah.
But dude, as soon as season 2 for Yellow Jackets comes out, you bet I'll be picking up that Showtime subscription and watching season 2, because it's been a while. Like obviously Dexter New Blood, like that's something I was gonna love, but it's been a while since a show has really, kind of grabbed me like that. And I just binged the whole thing. It was awesome.
Okay.
So you definitely got
to
watch
it. Sounds like a fun thriller, at the very least. Yeah,
for sure.
Okay.
All right, we are going to get into spoilers for The Wise Man's Fear. Almost forgot the name of the book. And if you haven't read this, then definitely do that before listening to this podcast. So spoilers in 3, 2, 1, you've been warned. All right, so Chris, I kind of forgot a little bit the last episode that you had all these notes at the bottom. Is there any that we didn't get to, or that you specifically wanted to touch on?
Oh boy. Yeah. Let me look here. I'm trying to remember where we left off last time.
So
we got through a lot of
scroll down.
Okay. Well, you've got it front and center there. The the Cathay is something that I wanted to talk about that we didn't quite get to last time.
Okay.
And then Puppet, actually, we were on characters, and so
Yeah.
Puppet was a character that I kind of wanted to talk about. I don't know, he was one of the more eccentric characters, and you know, there's a fair amount of them in this series, but he was one of the more eccentric characters that we meet. And I guess I wanted, well, you know, absence of Gabe, just your opinion on whether, you know, do you think there's going to be more? Is he going to have a role to play in this story? Is he just sort of on the side? Because he seemed to know, when we meet Puppet, you know, he's in the archives and he's got fucking flame in the archives, which, you know, as we've learned from Name of the Wind, is sacrilege, heresy, right? That's, you know, Master Lauren will crucify anyone he catches with flame in there. So already he's in the archives with flame, so he's got special privileges. And then he's also sort of this strange guy that, you know, has a lot of obscure information. And then on top of this, he makes puppets of everyone, which is kind of just weird. But
yeah,
I don't know if there's any significance to that. But I don't know. He was an interesting character, and I've read some theories on him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, nothing like too crazy, but some people think he is a guard of sorts for whatever may be behind the stone doors.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people think he's just kind of, he's just there. You know, he's just there. And then there's some pretty outlandish, wild theories, like he's controlling Master Lauren through the use of his puppets, and like and he's actually the master of the archives or something.
That is kind of interesting, though, because sympathy is very similar to voodoo, and we've seen like the typical like voodoo doll scenario.
Yes.
And we've seen the what do they call it? The mommet, where they make a voodoo doll and they use sympathy. And so his puppets are kind of similar to that. And it even goes so far as to say, you know, he's carving one that looks exactly like Quoth. And he's like, it looked just like me. Like, it looks really like it's uncannily similar.
Yeah.
And so we know that the more alike things are, the more of a sympathetic link they have. And so, you know, you saying that actually makes me wonder if he is using the puppets in some sympathetic way.
Wow, that would be interesting. To control Master Lauren.
I don't know if I'd say I don't know if I'd say he's like controlling people, but I just wonder if he's using them as a sympathetic link for something.
For some purpose.
Did you well, first of all, how old do you think Puppet is?
I mean, he's not he's younger than, what's their friend's name, who has been at the university for years and years and years.
God, what's his name? Oh my God.
I'm blanking. I'm sorry. I'm tired.
Yeah, me too. Man, no.
It starts with an M. Yeah, Minette.
Yeah, Minette. Yeah, okay.
Minette. Yeah.
Minette.
Yeah. So he's younger than him, isn't he? And then
I don't know. Does it say? Because I was trying to pay attention to it this read through, and I don't remember it ever saying his age. They don't indicate it. Okay. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because the reason I ask that is people wonder if he is Techum.
Oh, what? Really?
Yeah, and I haven't. This isn't a theory that I've read too deep into, but I think it's a pretty popular theory, is that he might be Techum. But then, of course, every theory is like, oh, this guy is Tamerlane the Great, and this guy's Techum, right. And like everybody's got to be somebody in these theories. So, you know, you don't really know, but it's interesting to think like he is like a super mysterious character. And he is like really kind of wise. He's kind of like that wise wizard in the mountains he's got that kind of feel to him, I feel like, even though he's eccentric and weird.
That's true. People come to him for advice and, with questions and but the famous philosopher Tecum. Okay. I don't
know. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, actually, I'm just reading notes here. The clarification on Puppet, they do describe him as having pure white hair, but his face is smooth and unlined. So it's hard to really put an age on him. So that's, that
interesting.
Doesn't really answer the question, but
because if he was Tecum, I mean, Tecum would have lived for a long time, so he would probably be ageless somehow.
Yeah, right.
Whether he's part Fae or whatever, but I don't know. That's interesting. Did you notice? So you obviously saw the candles, but did you notice that he had a window in his room?
Oh no, I forgot about that, I guess. What, a window, huh?
Yeah, he has and this is like in the basement of the library, right?
Right, the archives, yeah.
And so he's got this window in the back of his room.
What does it look out onto? Like the outside?
The curtains were closed. So it's like, where does that window go? And I wonder if I can't remember if I talked about this in the last video, but the common theory for why he has candles is that they will turn blue if the Chandrian
I read that
come
too.
Nearby.
Yes, that's why he's speculated to be a sort of watchdog or guard of some kind, right?
Right. Yeah. And so it makes me wonder if his window somehow looks into the tomb of Jax behind the 4-plate door.
That would be pretty intense.
Because,
what a view, right?
Because imagine you go through that 4-plate door and then you go down into the tomb, and that's about the level that his room would be at. And what if that window just looked right into Jax?
That would be interesting.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah. That is not a room that I'd want to sleep in, but
oh yeah, for sure, dude. I know, right?
But yeah, I mean, that's basically all I had on Puppet. I just kind of wanted to talk about him because he's a weird character that sticks out to you, right? I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we didn't get to this last week, but let's talk about the Cathay. What are just your overall opinions of this scene? How did you feel about it? First impressions.
So I will say a word to describe the Cathay is unsettling. That thing is very frightening.
Yeah.
First of all, just the way it's described in the book, and actually the voice that the narrator does for it is pretty decent too.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of the Joker, to be honest.
Yeah.
A little bit. But the way how it's just killing butterflies, like when Kavoth walks up to the tree, he describes what he thinks are flowers around the tree, I think. And then he just realized there are thousands of butterfly wings because this thing is just I mean, I don't know. It's just sort of an unsettling thing. It's like, killing a butterfly is not that, it's not horrific or that horrible, but just thousands of them. It's just kind of, it's creepy.
Right. Yeah.
And he says this quote, Kavoth is kind of wondering why this thing would tell him, give him information about Cinder and the Chandrian. And he says, "Are you looking for a different why? Are you wondering why I tell you these things? What good comes of it? Maybe this Cinder did me a bad turn once. Maybe it amuses me to set a young pup like you snapping at his heels. Maybe the soft creaking of your tendons as you clench your fists is like a sweet symphony to me. Oh yes, it is. And you can be sure." I'm just like, dude, what?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that gets you the way it gets me, but the way he just says the soft creaking of your tendons as you clench your fists is like a sweet symphony to me. That just, absolutely, for some reason, very unsettling. It's just like, what is this creature? And
it's really all to show you that, you know, even though this Cathay is telling you things that you probably want to know, it has absolutely no good intentions towards you in any way whatsoever.
Yes.
So anything that it does tell you, I think it's to further drive home the point that anything it does tell you, like, it is not going to be anything that leads to good things. Like, even though it's like, oh, will this person fall in love with me or not? And they tell you it, like, they're telling you that because they know that in some way it's going to harm you or harm the world. What did you think of that whole kind of conversation between Bast and Chronicler there in the end, where they're talking about, you know, like the fallout from the Cathay, and the Chronicler was kind of like, remember, he like hits Bast.
Yes.
And he's like
snap out of it, man, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah. And he's like, if you hit me back, that'll be exactly what the Cathay wants.
Right.
And then Bast doesn't do it, and he hits him again. He's like, if you don't hit me, that's exactly what the Cathay wants.
Right. And lose. Like,
yeah,
no matter what you do, it's what the Cathay wants. Right.
Right. And so he's like, you might as well just
do
live, like, live how you want. And, you know, basically he's saying there's no possible way that the Cathay could control every little tiny decision. Like, maybe on the big scale, he kind of knows like what might happen or what might lead to what, but I feel like Chronicler is kind of skeptical of the Cathay, and he is, you know.
Yeah, and that was a clever thing to do by Chronicler. I enjoyed that. I was also really surprised by Bast's, multiple responses to the Cathay, and just how sort of vehement he was. It was like, he was so angry the first time, and with Chronicler, and how he's like, you know nothing about this, you know. And so that was surprising to me, how clearly terrified he was of this thing,
right?
And how just the mere fact that Kvothe had spoken with it was, you know, sort of a, I don't know, a death sentence, so to speak, for him. At least that's how it seemed Bast felt, right?
And
so
and
yeah,
also,
oh, go ahead.
Also, how did Kvothe get past the guards? Because there's supposed to be guards around it all the time.
Yeah, that's an open question, right?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
How did he get past the guards? And then how does, I guess, the what do they call them? Aren't they actually called the Sith?
Yes.
That will come after anyone and kill them, anyone who speaks to the Cathay, because of the potential repercussions it could have.
Right.
So I'm curious about them. Are they going to make an appearance at some point in the next book? And, you know, is it the kind of thing where the sort of the remedy is worse than the actual original issue? Like, is the Sith going around just murdering people who they think are under the Cathay's influence or have been influenced by the Cathay? Is that helping, or is that, you know, is
that furthering the Cathay's plot? Like,
right.
Was the Cathay planning on them killing this?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many questions surrounding the Cathay, and, you know, these recently introduced Sith, and you know, what I really want to know how much influence it actually has. I tend to be skeptical, like Chronicler, like this thing, right? I mean, this isn't an omnipotent being that's just, you know, omnipresent at, you know, everywhere, right? Controlling every little interaction. Maybe the big events, but I don't know. Well, I mean, we'll see. But it's just my biggest question is, are all of the major events in this series going to be explained by a sort of an all-powerful being sort of pulling all the strings? I don't know. It'll be, we'll see, I guess. But it's definitely an unsettling creature, and I want to know more about it. I want to know I'd like to hear another phase opinion on it other than
Bast.
Bast's.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And I was trying to remember what Florian had to say about it. I don't think I'm not sure she had much to say.
She didn't have much to say, but she did mention Florian says that Quoth was not mentally damaged by the Cathay.
She like checks him out. Yeah.
Yeah. And some people who come back from the Cathay are like really messed
Ruined.
up in the head after everything. And she says that he did no the Cathay did no lasting damage to Quoth.
Okay. So that begs the question: those guards must be not be doing a very good job if people come back, every so often from visiting the Cathay.
Yeah,
or it's on purpose. They're letting people do that.
Exactly. Yeah, like what agenda do they have? And that because I would imagine that somebody had to let him through. If they are as vigilant as Bast says they are, then they had to have like known who he was and let him go through, or they're not around anymore and Bast doesn't know.
That's possible too. Yeah. Or I wonder if it's a mortal thing. They keep other Fae away from it, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's talk about some of the things real quick that we learned from that scene. We learned that Haliax is 5,000 years old.
Yes.
I'd be interested to, I don't know if we've been told when the Lawn Ray story happened. But I think it's all, maybe even in the book, it might have even told us that Lawn Ray is Haliax.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that that's what that deal is. The Cathay says that the mayor has come close to the Chandrian, but he doesn't know it. If Quoth stays by him, he will eventually find them. And that is what hurts so much about the mayor kicking Quoth out, is that if he had stuck by the mayor, he would have found the Chandrian.
Right.
That's really, really hard to hear. The Cathay tells Quoth that it's asking like, why did they kill your parents and why did they leave you alive? And then he says something scared them away.
And we assume that's the Amir, right? That's
either the Amir or Telu.
Okay.
Because I think we kind of talked about it last week. Martin, when the lightning tree scene happened, Martin is like praying on the ground praying to Telu, and then Cinder like looked up like he heard something, and that's when he ran away. And so a lot of people think that it's Telu that scared them away, but it's also kind of interesting because it's like, then where does the Amir fit into that?
Right. Yeah.
And then, like you said, Cinder got on the Cathay's bad side, so we know that they are somewhat enemies. He does.
Which is surprising though, because with the kind of power that Bast makes the Cathay, makes it sound like the Cathay has, right? You'd think the last thing you'd want to do, even as a Chandrian, is get on its bad side. So again, that begs into question, how much influence does the Cathay actually have?
Right. Yeah. And how misinformed is Bast, because this book is full of unreliable narrators. Quoth is just one big unreliable narrator. And so I think it's fair to say that Bast is probably an unreliable narrator as well. We do get confirmation that Quoth saw Cinder at the lightning tree. So he confirms that was in fact who Quoth thought he was.
Yes.
He says they can hide their signs. They know ways to hide their Chandrian signs.
Which that makes sense. I mean, that's the only way that they would be able to
kind of
hide for so long, go unnoticed in the wide world, right?
Right.
So that's.
he says that Denna's patron beats her, that it's a game to him. Nothing that will leave a scar, he says. So then, we asked, I think last week we talked about it, like, is this a game of tack that he's beating her in, or are they training in fighting, or is her patron really just beating her?
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, the simplest answer. Yeah.
Right. But I do think it's interesting, and I love parts of the book like this because just through watching so many like theories and stuff like that, it's really clear that Rothfuss chooses his words really carefully.
Yes.
And so for the Cathay to say Denna's patron beats her, it's a game to him, I feel like that has some significance. And I know that sounds really like conspiracy theory, like whatnot, but I really have learned that Rothfuss like really chooses his words, and he usually has them there for a reason. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to find out that this is a game of tack or a training match, which could also be considered a game. The Cathay says that Denna thinks of Quoth before she blacks out, or before the black. I'm assuming that means before she blacks out. But again, this Cathay is all about playing with words. So
misleading,
there's no way to know if that really does mean like blacking out, or if some other thing related to black. He says that Denna was just beginning to trust Quoth before he left. His obsession with the Chandrian really ruined everything. And I think this is a really kind of bitter moment where it's like, the Cathay confirms like Denna was like, you were almost there, you were so close, and then you fucked everything up.
That one hurts.
Oh my god, dude, that it hurts. And then Bass tells us later that Jax spoke to the Cathay before stealing the moon,
and that's what led to
sparking the creation war. Lonray talked to the Cathay before taking Mir Terrenial, and he says the Cathay also have something to do with the creation of the Nameless. All very interesting things. If Jack spoke to the Cathay before stealing the moon, like we've seen what major repercussions that has had. It's opened this gateway into the Fey realm, and sparked the creation war from that. And then Lonray, probably the biggest thing is Lonray talked to the Cathay before taking Mir Terrenial. That, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, that's pretty much what started the Chandrian. Like, I'm pretty sure Lonray was like the first Chandrian. So, I wonder what long-term repercussions Quoth is going to have from talking to the Cathay.
I mean, assumingly some serious ones, because we have to still somehow get from where we are now to the inn, right?
Yeah.
And then also just real quick, there was one other thing that the Cathay mentions a joke with the mayor, and he says that Quoth will get it. He'll get the joke when it happens.
What was that? I think it was the mayor will lead you right to their door, and then he's like, you'll laugh when you figure it out.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he's talking about the mayor leading Quoth to either the Amir or the Chandrian store.
Yeah, right. And so I'm kind of wondering what that's alluding to. So yeah, I hope we find out.
Yeah, I bet we're gonna get more mayor in the third book, because like I pointed out last week, he's got to be the current king in the world. From what we saw in the frame narrative, the tabards of the soldiers.
That's right, the same colors.
Yeah, and so I would be very surprised to not see him in the third book. So real quick, I want to go through a collection of Vachette's quotes because
she's great.
She's so funny. And she was, not like my favorite character of the series or anything, but she was like definitely one of my favorite characters this read through. Like I really realized this time through how much I absolutely loved Vachette. She says they're talking about how if you love someone, you wouldn't have sex with anybody else but that person, right?
Yeah.
And she tells Quoth, there is a great deal of difference between a penis and a heart. I love that. And I wish I could do her accent because it makes it so much better in the accent.
Right. It adds to it a lot.
And
that casual attitude towards sex that the Adam have is
interesting, huh?
It is. Yeah. It's, I don't know. Could probably live in a society like that, maybe.
Right? Yeah, for sure. I love these moments where she just like absolutely shits on Tempe.
Yes.
and Quoth is like, he's like, why isn't like Tempe training me? Like, he's very good at this. And she says things like, Tempe is closer to being a sailboat than a teacher.
Yes. Yeah. Which is so funny because, as we get to know Tempe, we kind of think of him as like this ultra skilled warrior, which he is, but then you come to find he's not like held in very high regard among his own people. It's like, oh wow, okay. So interesting. Yeah, closer to being a sailboat than a teacher.
Yeah. And then I forget what exactly this is referring to. I think she was talking about Quoth's skill with the sword that he comes in with. And she says, it's as if Tempe brought home a dog that can whistle. The fact that you are out of tune is quite beside the point.
Right. No, I loved that. Yeah, that was a great quote. I think that was in relation to his either his language or his hand gestures, I thought.
Yeah, that makes more sense for sure.
Yeah, because everyone's like so amazed that he can even speak the language. But
yeah.
No, I mean, that's a perfect quote. It's like, yeah, I love that one. That's one of my favorites.
Just the way it's worded has such a perfect punchline, I guess. Just that perfect last part of the sentence. And then after she whips him a bunch of times with the branch, and she tells him to come back later in the day, and she's going to do it again. And he calls her bluff, and she gets mad and she says, "You twiggy little skeeth."
Yeah.
And I swear it's like it's the accent that really makes that joke.
Right.
But dude, I laughed so hard when she said that, because I'm like, what a weird grouping of words. Like, yes. you twiggy little skeeth. This is great. And then I also loved this part where Quoth goes up to the sword tree, and he's trying to figure out what to bring, and he can't figure it out. And so he doesn't bring anything, and he grabs a leaf on his way back, and he like cuts his palm, and he shows it to what's her name? Cheyenne. And
Shea, or Cheyenne, yeah.
And he's walking side by side with Vachette back to the area where they live, and she's mocking him, and she's like, "Oh, did you hear what Quoth brought back from the sword tree? Things a barbarian cannot understand. Silence and stillness, the heart of a Demre. What did he give to Cheyenne? The willingness to bleed for the school." Seriously, it's like you stepped out of a storybook.
Yeah, she was so mad. Just like, she's like, "You're ridiculous. Like, I cannot believe." Because of course everyone else is just like fawning, like, "Oh my gosh!"
Right.
Like, she's just like, "Are you serious? You're such a drama queen." Like, I mean, which is true. He's a trooper, right? It's like, I'm gonna. Yeah, that was a great quote too.
I love that part. So then, kind of kind of going away from the humorous, I really liked this. Looks like it's around chapter 73. And there's this intro to the chapter where Quoth is talking about Tecum and his kind of belief on secrets and the different kinds of secrets. And he says, most secrets are secrets of the mouth. Gossip shared and small scandals whispered. Their secrets long to be let loose upon the world. A secret of the mouth is like a stone in your boot. At first, you're barely aware of it. Then it grows irritating, then intolerable. Secrets of the mouth grow larger the longer you keep them, swelling until they press against your lips. They fight to be let free. Secrets of the heart are different. They are private and painful, and we want nothing more than to hide them from the world. They do not swell and press against the mouth. They live in the heart, and the longer they are kept, the heavier they become. Tecum claims it is better to have a mouth full of poison than a secret of the heart. Any fool will spit out poison, he says, but we hoard these painful treasures. We swallow hard against them every day, forcing them deep inside us. They sit, growing heavier, festering. Given enough time, they cannot help but crush the heart that holds them. And I was just like, wow, man, if that isn't like the truest thing I've ever heard.
It is. I mean, like, it's applicable to real life, right? I mean, yeah, it's a beautiful quote.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's so good. And one thing I really liked about this chapter is at the end of it, it all kind of comes full circle. And this is what Rothfuss does so well, is he'll start something sometimes at the beginning of a chapter, and then at the end of the chapter, he'll reference it again. And it's kind of like when a really good like stand-up comedian tells one of his first jokes, and then the very last joke is like a play on that joke, and it's like, oh yeah, we're back to the beginning. Yeah. And so this isn't like funny, but I feel like Rothfuss kind of does the same thing with these chapters, and it evokes a really strong emotion. So after Denna has kind of sung her song for Quoth and they get in that huge argument, at the end of the chapter, he's trying to write to her and tell her about this horrible thing that happened to his family, to explain this whole Chandrian thing, whether it sounds crazy or not. But this thing is just like sitting inside him, and he can't get it out. And he gets so mad. He gets like very drunk, and he's not able to get any writing done. And he hits his hand against the desk and it starts bleeding. And then at that point, to end the chapter, Quoth says, "That's how heavy a secret can become. It can make blood flow easier than ink." And it just works on so many levels, because he has this pen on the table that literally has ink encrusted on it. Right. And so ink is literally not flowing from this pen. And he's saying like this secret
that he's trying to tell Denna is.
Yeah. And he hits his hand and he's bleeding. He's like, it literally makes blood flow easier than ink. And I was just like, when that hit me, I was like, that is a perfect line. I was like, that is a perfect quote. And it references the secret, and it brings the whole chapter full circle. And I'm just like, wow, that was I've always known this, but especially on this last read through, I was really, really aware of, I'm like, Patrick Rothfuss is a master of his craft.
Yes. Things like this solidify this series as a masterpiece, right? I mean,
yeah, like it's just a work of art. Did you find any quotes that you wanted to talk about?
No, not really. But
okay.
I'm sorry. There is one that comes to mind that's really funny. Is
okay.
when Tempe gets in that bar fight.
Oh yeah.
That scene?
Yeah.
When I think they're coming back from they traveled back to buy supplies, and he and Quoth are in the so is this man looking to buy sex with me? Tempe.
Yeah.
I wish I could do his accent, because that also makes it too, right?
Yeah.
Is this man looking to buy sex with me?
Oh my God. And and the whole like there was like 4 miscommunications that went back and forth, and he keeps turning to Quoth for verification. And there was one moment where the guy is like, he said something like, your mother is a whore or something, and Tempe doesn't know what this means, and so he turns to Quoth, and Quoth is like, how do I explain this? He's saying that people pay your mom for sex. And Tempe goes, oh, thank you. Like,
yeah, he's like, thank you. How kind of you. Yeah.
Oh,
such a nice thing to say.
And then of course we learn later when we're in a Demre what they think of sex. And I'm sure in Tempe's head, he would be like, oh, somebody is like willing to pay my mom for sex. Like it's like a compliment.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my God.
That is funny. Actually, one of my favorite quotes you have written down there. You have it here. But one of my favorites that I meant to write down was, there are 3 things all wise men fear: a sea and storm, a night with no moon, and the anger of a gentle man.
Yeah.
And you have a note, why was this important enough to name the book after it? That's a good question. I guess there's a lot to, it's a short sentence, but there's a lot to unpack there, with those 3 items: a sea and storm, a night with no moon, and the anger of a gentle man.
We know what the night with no moon is.
We do now, right? Yeah.
Yeah. A sea and storm, I mean, it might be as simple as it sounds.
That kind of, for me, that kind of sort of means to, respect and fear sort of Mother Nature, right? Just the power of the sea and I guess nature in general, right? So
yeah,
I mean, it's kind of what that means. And then the anger of a gentle man, that's a more interesting one.
That's my favorite part of the sentence, because if you think about it, like, a gentle man, being what he is, does not usually get angry.
Mm-hmm.
And so if he does, like, that is something, the anger of a gentle man, like if something has pushed a gentle man to anger, it must be something very serious. And I also kind of wonder if it is kind of playing to the idea of, this is a person who never lets their anger out. So when they do, it's like, it's a storm, like it's a huge, like, violent thing. And I feel like there's just kind of a feeling that comes with those words, the anger of a gentle man. I feel like there's just a feeling I get from that sentence. Is that kind of what you got from it?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess my greater question would be, how does it apply to the story here?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was wondering, is because we know what the name of the wind is. Like, Quoth, for the first book, Quoth calls the name of the wind, and that's kind of what the book is like centered around in a lot of ways, is the calling of the name of the wind.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what does the wise man's fear really have to do with the story at large? Because it's not, I feel like I would understand more if this was like a constant theme throughout the book, that, there are certain things that wise men fear. But I feel like this is one of, unless I missed a bunch of them, I think this is one of 2 or 3 times that a wise man's fear is mentioned. And the other 2 times, it wasn't anything remotely as profound as this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a quote that makes you think.
Yeah. So then one of my favorite quotes that is kind of on the sadder side. What I think this is right after the thing with the Cathay, and Bast is like freaking out, and it's in the frame narrative, the present day.
Mm-hmm.
And quote says, "Oh Bast, I know what's oh Bast, I know what sort of story I'm telling. This is no comedy. This is the end of the story, Bast. We all know that. This is not a dashing romance. This is not a fable where folk come back from the dead. This is not a rousing epic meant to stir the blood. No, we all know what kind of story this is." And then chronicler says that it's, not the end of the story. If Quoth is still here in the present day, there's still time to rewrite his story. And Quoth kind of has this moment where he just kind of shakes his head and he looks at these guys and he says, "Oh, you're both so young." There's a couple things here. First of all, I really like the first quote just because it really cements the fact that this story is not going to end pleasantly. Like this isn't your hero's story. Like this is a tragedy. I really like how Rothfuss kind of confirms that, and he kind of says like, yeah, this is the end of the story here. Like it doesn't end well. And then with chronicler, saying what he says, and then Quoth saying you're both so young, it makes me wonder, how old is Quoth?
I wonder that too.
Because he spent a good amount of time in the Fae, and I feel like there's enough proof with Bast being around that he must go back in the third book.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah, he must have gone back. And how much time did he spend there when he went back the second time?
Right.
Because they talk about it throughout the books, kind of like, he seems older, but then he'll get a vigor or a light in his eyes or something, and then he'll seem young again, right? He'll seem. I forget the exact context, but there's certain points in the books where someone's describing seeing Coates, right, the innkeeper, and how all of a sudden he looks, young and
right. Like when he smiles or something, like it brings out this youth in him.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I kind of wonder if there's a really old soul in that young body.
Huh. Like he lived decades in the Fae.
Yeah. I wonder. Another one of my favorite quotes. I literally laugh at this every single time. Quoth and Sim and Will are all super drunk coming back from the Aeolian, and they lay down by the Greystone.
Great scene.
And yes, it's like one of my favorite scenes. And Willem says something in Sealdish. It's Sealdish, right?
Yeah.
And Sim yells, "Hey, Turin, no more of your donkey talk."
They just can't handle it. Yeah, after a couple drinks, Sealdish just becomes intolerable. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. And then we have "I need you to breathe for me." That's 7 words.
There's a lot of those. Yeah, there's so many of these throughout here. Yeah, "I need you to breathe for me."
I also loved this quote between Fella and Quoth. It's at the very end of the book. And they're talking about Denna and what he can do to win back Denna or whatever. And Fella says, "Care for a lady's perspective?" And he says, I'll settle for yours.
Yeah.
I love that. And then we have for all that she lacked your fire, 7 words.
Yep, that is another good one. Just a beautiful sentence.
Yeah.
For all that she lacked your fire.
And then something that I'm gonna say far more often now that I caught it on this read. Bass says, "I don't give a fiddler's fuck." It was super good.
There's a quote from chapter 6. The quote, "It had flaws.
Yeah.
But what does that matter when it comes to matters of the heart? We love what we love. Reason does not enter into it. In many ways, unwise love is the truest love. Anyone can love a thing because that's as easy as putting a penny in your pocket. But to love something despite, to know the flaws and love them too, that is rare and pure and perfect.
That is such a fantastic quote. And it really does a good job of explaining how Quoth feels about Denna. He knows that she has these flaws, but he's willing to overlook them. And he believes that that is an even truer love than loving something because.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I guess just, first of all, the quote itself is beautiful in the language that it uses, but
yes,
I think it, remember, I'm kind of on the fence about whether Kavoth really does love. I mean, I guess he does love Denna. It's at this point we know it's true, but
you're on the fence of whether she loves him.
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose I kind of feel like he looks at her. I kind of feel like he puts her on a pedestal almost.
Oh
in some
yeah.
cases.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know if he has. I don't know. Do you think he has a realistic picture of who Denna really is? I mean,
no.
Yeah. So it's hard for me to say that this quote directly applies to Denna from Kvoth's perspective, just because I don't think he recognizes all her flaws yet. I mean, but ideally, this is something that he would do if he were to love her, is see her flaws and love her despite that. But funny thing about this quote, he's actually talking about his lute when he says this quote.
Yeah.
That's what the context was. Flaws are what give things character, what make them unique. Perfection is,
overrated.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, if everything was perfect, then nothing would be different. Everything would be the same.
Right.
So I don't know. Again, this is kind of the stereotypical quote that I think a lot of people pull from this book and then use in their wedding vows. But
probably, yeah,
it's a good quote.
Yeah, I absolutely love this quote. So when you first read that, were you making the Denna connection or no?
I mean, my mind obviously drifted to Denna during this, right? Maybe Kavoth actually thinks that this is how he feels about Denna.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just, again, like I said, just sort of the way that he puts her on a pedestal, so to speak.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and right. I think, as you and I can look at that and be like, and we see everything from the third person, and we can see all these flaws and everything. But I think the thing that is interesting about these books is, as much as the romance like infuriates me and makes me so mad that these two people are such idiots, it's also very true in a lot of ways. Like, I remember being in, like high school or, in my teens, and thinking of someone like this, like they can do no wrong. Like they like, even if they do have flaws, I accept them for it. And kind of like this grandiose like idea of love. And I feel like, our protagonist is a 16-year-old boy, and true. So it's easy to forget that sometimes, but I think that Rothfuss did a really good job. Like I said, as infuriating as it is, Rothfuss did a really good job of kind of capturing that teenage, unsure, young love, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is true. I mean, it's easy to forget how young Kavoth really is. I mean, just, by the way he acts. And as they talk about in the story, right? He's years ahead of his age in terms of maturity and capability. And
right. So I have this quote here from the book. So it's when do you remember this interesting fact thing that a Loden would make them
yes.
do.
I was gonna say anything that a Loden says is a favorite quote of mine. Stop
Absolutely.
grabbing at my tits, Ray Larkenboth.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that a Loden says, I wish I had recorded all of a Loden's speech during this read through, because everything he says cracked me up.
Absolutely. And I loved the idea of him. He didn't come up with like a creative name for this game. He just called the game Interesting Fact. And like he even says at one point, Quoth is bad at playing Interesting Fact. Like, you know what I mean? Just like, that's I'm like, what a lazy and hilarious thing to name the
Interesting
game.
Fact. Today we're gonna play Interesting Fact. Yeah.
Yeah.
Both. Tell me an interesting fact. Boring,
Yeah. And so he calls on this kid named Uresh.
That's right.
And this guy says, you can divide infinity an infinite number of times, and the resulting pieces will still be infinitely large. Yeah. Urish said in his odd Lenati accent. But if you divide a non-infinite number an infinite number of times, the resulting pieces are non-infinitely small. Since they are non-infinitely small, but there are an infinite number of them, if you add them back together, their sum is infinite. This implies that any number is in fact infinite. Wow, Elodin said after a long pause. He leveled a serious finger at the Lenati man. Uresh, your next assignment is to have sex. If you do not know how to do this, see me after class.
I forgot about that one. Yeah, that one's classic.
Oh, dude. I loved anything that happened in Elodin's class was super funny. Like when he takes the milk seed pod and he's trying to tell them like, oh, it's like this. And he throws the milk seed pod and it goes everywhere, but it doesn't do what he wants it to do. And so then he like collects all the pieces again and he tries it again. He's doing it over and over. And it's not making his point. And so he gets really mad and just storms out of the room. All right, so let's go into our favorite moments, our most emotional moments. And speaking of most emotional, we have a new segment on the podcast today, things that made Spencer cry.
Which will be a longer list than things that made Chris cry, but
yeah, okay. Exactly. I'm like, I get so emotional with these books. And all of these are to kind of varying degrees. Not all of these like literally made me cry. But some of these are just they really hit me hard every time I read them. And now that I'm a couple weeks removed from the book, it actually seems silly to tear up at some of these, but like I said, in the midst of the story, it is very moving. Yes. I think the one that we can both agree on is Ari comforting Quoth after the whole plumb bob thing.
That was actually one that got me to tear up. That was so heart-wrenching. Yeah, when Quoth just breaks down and starts crying and she's comforting him, and he's kind of just comes to terms with the fact that he's never going to see his family or his mother again. He says, I'll never see her again. It's like, oh, damn, that's God. Yeah, that's heavy.
It's heartbreaking. And she says something like, she's like, it's okay. Like, you don't.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you have the chapter?
It's in chapter 7.
It is. Okay. It's okay, Ari said softly. I'm here. You're safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just love this idea of Ari, who Quoth has been taking care of. Like he has been like the older brother kind of figure to this girl.
Yeah.
And he's been making sure that she's okay. And then when he's kind of in this moment where he is like really losing it, it's kind of this moment that like clarifies that they are family for each other, and that she will be there for him just like he is for her. And then later on, she even tells him, if you ever need a place to go, you can stay in the Underthing. You can come live with me in the Underthing. And that was like a big moment for Ari, because she does not let people down there. Like she does, she's very much about her space. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was just a great character moment for those. Oh, this always makes me tear up a little bit. Quoth telling the story about the Rue who is inviting the wandering beggar into their family, and gives him like the water and the wine, and he's been traveling for days, and every single person up, huh? Kind of, and not probably not for the reasons you think, but they're. So this beggar is going from campfire to campfire to campfire, and he's getting rejected by every person. And the beggar finally comes to the Edema Rue camp.
Yeah, right.
And like they treat him really nicely and everything, and invite him to join them. And I think one of the things that really makes me tear up at this scene, for whatever reason, I think I was just like feeling the emotion of the character itself, even though this doesn't really relate to our world. The leader of the Edema Rue is calling him grandfather or father or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's been so long since this man has had any sort of comfort, since anybody has referred to him as family. And they sit him down and they call him like grandfather, and like, tell us your stories, and like they're treating him like part of the family. And man, that just gets me every time. And then the other part that kind of makes me tear up is in a lesser way, but in kind of like a deeper way. Quoth is telling this to Sim and Willem, and he explains that this is not a story that they tell random people. This is a story that the Edema Rue tell each other.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like this official moment of Quoth saying like, you guys are my family.
Right.
And that definitely makes me tear up a little bit.
That's true. No, that was a powerful scene as well. Yeah, I really like that one as well.
But also just like that whole scene, I love that scene so much, because it just makes me think of nights in like high school or something, where we would all be, either smoking a lot of pot or drinking, whatever, and coming back from somewhere, and we all just like decide just being outside, and we all decide to settle down on the grass somewhere, and we all just kind of shoot the shit.
Carefree for the moment.
And just like one of those late nights where you're with like your best friends, and you're all so drunk that you're being like really honest with each other, and like being really like connected. And that's just kind of what it reminded me of. And so I always really like that scene. Definitely to a lesser extent, the funeral for the guy in the Frame story, who died from
Shep, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Got killed by the skin crawler, or the.
Yes. They all come into the inn, and they're all kind of doing toast to this guy that died. And even though we didn't know him very well, it's very clear that these people did, right? And so Quoth says to I think it's Quoth that says this, to old friends who deserved better than they got. And I'm just like, man, that's a really good toast. It's as good a toast as any.
That's one to remember for sure.
Yeah. So one that didn't quite make me tear up, but it made me feel a very strong emotion, is the false troopers, and the ones who have the girls in the tent.
Right.
And they then Quoth in the middle of the night kills these troopers.
Yes.
And he takes these girls all the way back to whatever the city is. And there's kind of this confrontation in the city. So there's this kid, Jason calls one of the girls a rue whore, and instantly Quoth breaks his arm.
Yes, that's
and
right.
then he's
like,
asking, and then he's asking for the kid's name, and he's like saying
he's
something.
Like, you broke my arm. He's like, yeah, he's like, my arm.
Name.
He's like, name. Yeah.
And then Quoth says, looking around, I saw the anger bleed out of the faces of the men around me, as if I'd used up the whole town's supply in a sudden, furious flash. Instead, they watched Jason looking slightly embarrassed, as if the boy were apologizing for the lot of them. And I think that was such a great scene, because you have these people who are supposed to be grateful, but they're coming at Quoth like, you know, you're probably the one that took these girls away, and like, what did you do to them? And they're so angry, but their anger doesn't stem from what Quoth might have done. Their anger stems from the fact that they were not able to save these girls.
Their own inadequacies or their sense of guilt, right?
Yeah.
For failing to rescue them. Even though they did try, to be fair, but they failed.
Right. And they turned around, like as soon as somebody got hurt, they turned around and went back to town and never went back out to look for them.
Yeah.
And so it was just like this really powerful scene that always makes me feel a lot of things. Oh my God. When Quoth loses his loot and Denna gets him a loot case.
Yes.
Dude, the case is worth more than Quoth's loot, and so much love and care was put into this thing. But yeah,
this was sort of the retcon that I had to make to the last episode, because I remember I kind of gave Denna a hard time in the last episode,
right?
And then I had totally spaced on this scene in which she spends a pretty penny and a lot of care in getting this loot case crafted for Kvothe. And so it's like, yeah, that is evidence against what I had said earlier, right? I mean, she clearly cares about him, right?
Yeah.
And I still don't know if it's love. I'm not sure, but
sure.
Yeah, this was a scene that made Denna go way up in my books.
Oh yeah.
But just this whole chapter, or maybe it was a couple chapters where Kvothe thinks that he's lost his loot case. I mean, I remember feeling like actual anxiety for him. I was like, oh my God. I was like, no. It's like, not again. This can't happen again.
Yeah. Especially the first scene where he realizes it's gone, and he goes down to the counter in the inn that he's staying at. He's like, is my loot behind the counter? Wait, no, is it over here? And I just know that feeling. I know, of that like losing something precious, and you're like, it's not here.
It's gotta be here. And then you go and check the same spot like over and over again. It's like he went back up to his room and like checked under his bed, like it's not there. It's not there. Check behind the door. It's like, even though you know it's not going to be there, you look for it anyway because you're desperate. You're like, it has to be here.
Yeah.
And then there's just that relief.
Just
that relief would.
I was just about to say there's a huge talk about all that buildup, and then there's a huge emotional payoff in this scene, because Quoth, she shows him the loot case, because that's the first thing they bring out, and it's beautiful. He's describing how like master crafted this thing is, and then she says, let's see how well your loot fits. And then he comes back to Earth, and he's like, oh, but my loot is gone. I have no idea where it is. And then the quote is, the man behind the counter brought out my loot and placed it in the case, and I began to cry.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that is so impactful.
It was, because he brings it, he makes it like, he stretches out to the very end, right?
Yeah.
Like we think it's like, Kvothe is, internally he's like, oh man, I'm gonna have to tell Denna that this is a great gift, but my loot has been stolen. And it's like the very end, we think his loot's been stolen, and then the last line is just like, he brought it out, and I began to cry. I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's a huge payoff to that chapter. And it was actually really endearing how badly Denna felt about it. Cause in the very next chapter, he's like he's like dying crying.
Yeah, right.
And she is just apologizing over and over. She's like, I'm so sorry, I had no idea, like how I was so stupid, like I should have thought you always hold it like it's your child. And I loved all that payoff to that. It was so good.
Yeah.
So the last like scene that I kind of teared up at, and of course to like a lesser extent because this isn't that sad, but
sure.
When Stapes tells Quoth and Alvaron the truth about the birds, and it says, Stapes covered the dead Sipquick with a cupped hand. It's like they were giving up their little souls to make you feel well again. Something inside the man suddenly gave way and he began to cry, the deep, hopeless sobs of an honest man who has been frightened and helpless for a long time, watching the slow death of a well-loved friend.
Oh
yeah, man. That's amazing. That's about to make me tear up right now. Yeah,
Stapes loves Alvaron. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
it's tender. It's a tender moment.
Yeah. I loved that whole reveal because you're going through those collection of chapters, and Quoth has come up with this idea. Well, if we give your medicine to the birds and they start dying, we know for a fact it's poison. And they just don't die. And you're getting to the point where like Quoth is really screwed. Like if these birds do not start dying, like he is really and totally fucked.
Like actually screwed. Yes.
Yeah.
Not gonna talk his way out of this. Yeah.
Exactly. And then that moment where him and Alvaron are kind of arguing and Stapes leaves the room and Alvaron's like, what do you have in your hand? And it's this realization that Stapes has been pulling these birds out of the cage. It's just another great payoff.
Yeah. I know. Again, yeah, just another huge sigh of relief, just like with the loot. I was like, oh my Lord, just so close.
Yeah.
Got but to the very end. And this is something I didn't actually see coming. I don't think I saw either of these coming in retrospect.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm thinking about it, I was just like, I was surprised both times. I was like, oh, thank God. Like, yeah.
All right, so those are kind of all the things that made me tear up or made me feel strongly. We didn't get to talk about this too much on the last episode. What were your favorite moments from this book? You've got to have a handful, I'm sure.
Yeah, I do have a handful. So, some of my favorite moments we already talked about. Just those real emotional moments are some of my top favorites, right? But then there's also some like exciting action scenes that we get to experience. So one of my probably favorite scenes is the whole. Well, I actually really enjoyed the forest sequence when he's with the mercenaries, but that sort of culminates in an epic battle, and we see, I guess, the horrors of what sympathy can be used for, malfeasance.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite scenes just because it was so memorable and because I was just kind of like, holy shit, the whole time. I mean,
yeah.
Again, we talked about this on the last episode, but very similar to how I was like, holy shit, with the fake troopers.
Yeah.
This is a very similar type of scene where, he's just decimating this bandit troop with sympathy, like gouging their eyes out and killing them.
Yeah.
While mutilating the corpse of one of their brethren. I'm just like,
yeah.
Oh my God, dude. This is next level sympathy shit.
Yeah. And it's kind of that same horrific feeling of when I won't spoil anything, but when we were watching this last season of Dexter, we've always kind of known that he like chops his bodies up, but then in this season we see him firsthand chop a body up, and it has a much different feeling than just the idea of knowing that he does it. And so with sympathy, it's kind of the same thing. Like, we know malfeasance can be used badly, and we've even seen it used against Quoth, like with the whole thing with the Graham and all that. But to see him actually like have this dead body and be doing like what equates to like blood magic, and just like stabbing this body over and over and having a reaction on the far side of the field from it, it was so intense. And it's described in such detail, like how certain parts of the body, like the knife didn't go through as easily. And it was really horrific. Like it really gave you a visceral feeling with it.
Yeah. So that was a great, like I said, great action scene. And then another one of my, that was this book, right? Where, Elodin and Kavoth go into, this was near the beginning of the book, I think, right? Where they go into Master Hem's rooms.
Yes.
And burn his clothes. I loved that whole sequence. Just the things that Elodin says, you know, like, why are you doing this? Like, well, I hate him.
Yeah.
That's why. There were some fantastic scenes with Elodin that I really, like I said, Elodin's one of my favorite characters, so I really like pretty much any scene with him and anything he says. So burning Hem's clothes, that was hilarious. When they go and show up at the window of Master Lauren and just like knock on his window, it's like, yeah, both needs access to the archives. Lauren's like, very well, like, kind of just goes along with it. Doesn't comment on anything like why are they outside his window at night, but so those are some, you know, lighter fun moments that I really enjoyed. What else? There's some more, but I'll let you.
What about the breaking into Ambrose's room and starting a fire?
Oh yeah, that is fantastic. That one is great.
Yeah.
I really liked the whole coordination with everyone too. Like they had that secret meeting at the campfire beforehand with the fella and Devi, and then the Medica girl. And then Will and Sim, right? Everyone kind of collaborates at the fire. They come up with this big elaborate plan. And I was kind of, you know, it's a little, you're kind of unsure about what exactly is about to happen, but you're like, all right, let's see where they go with this. And
I loved those moments in this book, because we got another one when they were all trying to find the pattern or the schematic for the Graham, and you kind of just have all these friends kind of working together. And it's kind of like the whole Breakfast Club idea, you know, all these people who aren't normally friends are here together serving one purpose, and they all become friends. And I just loved the idea behind that. Like you said, we had Fella, Devi, the girl from the Medica, and then Quoth, Will, and Sim. And all these people have not typically hung out together so far. And I just loved the way that they all kind of played off each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, Quoth breaking into Ambrose's room was so fantastic. He kicks over the chamber pot. He's just burning all his stuff, throwing all his stuff out the window. And then at some point he gets the Mommet back.
Right.
And I think that's also when he gets Denna's ring. Yeah. And then the payoff was the end when Ambrose comes in the room.
Ambrose comes up, and his whole demeanor, he makes Ambrose look like the bad guy. Like, I'm just trying to help, man. And, you know, it's like, wow, this Ambrose guy's huge dick.
Exactly. And he kind of explains it, not explains it away, but he says something that I thought really proved his innocence in a lot of ways, where he was like, why would I be stopping a fire in your room? Like, if I really wanted to get back at you, I would just let the fire go.
Yeah.
And like I had if I had known that this was your room, I would have just, like, I didn't even know this was your place.
Right.
So I thought that was really good. He always finds a way to wheedle out of it.
Right.
And the whole idea of Fella kind of taking Ambrose out or going out on a date with him, getting all dolled up to like kind of distract him. And then Sim says, our only other option was to stuff Willem into a dress.
Yeah.
Any others?
Yeah, I mean, another really tense scene was, so I think I said skin crawler earlier, but I think it's the skin dancer is what they were talking about with so that whole scene where the mercenary comes in,
yeah,
and then just goes nuts, and they have to try to kill it, and it ends up killing one of them, one of the inn patrons.
yeah,
that was a really tense scene, and it sort of underlines kind of how the world is in serious. She's seen the Scrael, but we're still not really sure what exactly those are, where they come from, right? Assumingly, I mean, the Fae, I guess. But and then this mercenary comes in, and then they have to end up trying to put this thing down because it starts getting aggressive, and ends up killing Shep. That whole scene was very tense and sort of exciting, and it sort of underlines like how bad the world is falling into despair, right? I mean, we've never seen anything like that in the story that Kavo's been telling us, right? Anything at that level of just strangeness and sort of. So it's like, what is going on? What happens that is making this world so bad? So we've already been introduced to the Scrael, but I'm still not really sure what those are. We're not quite sure what they are. I think assumingly they come from some area of the Fae. Is that correct? Or do they?
Yeah, I was about to say, unless it might have even been explicitly stated, but I get the feeling that something has been let loose, like some doorway has been opened up, and it is letting all these things into the world. And maybe that's what Doors of Stone is, like the actual name is this door that has been opened either to the Fae or something that has let all these horrors loose on the world. And a lot of people think that it has to do with Quoth opening the archive door, the locked door in the archives.
Right.
And that it has something to do with Jax being let loose into the world, and he is freeing all these demonic things and whatnot. Right. Oh, I really loved this scene where Denna meets the boys at the Aeolian, and they are playing corners with her.
Yes.
And they think that it's her first time playing corners, and she says, "Oh my, I've never played corners before. Can you teach me? Is it true that sometimes people play for money? You're lucky I gave you a slap on the hand rather than a full night fleecing that you deserve."
Yeah, so funny. No, that's a great scene, just because it's it's just such a believable, like, friends out having a good time. You just get that feeling, like that positive. Yeah.
Exactly. And like I said, I feel like Patrick writes, he writes everything super well, but especially all these like friend interactions. It's like, I feel like he definitely remembers what it was like to be a teen young adult, and the kind of humor and the kind of like ribbing that they give each other. I feel like that all flows really well.
The feelings that you have, the sort of the carefreeness in a way. It's a great scene. And like you noted that explains sympathy to her. That I liked that a lot as well, because it helps the reader sort of understand more how it's supposed to work.
It kind of tied up some loose ends, especially with like they're kind of talking like, if two things are linked and you're lifting something, the one you're lifting is going to be heavier because you're having to accommodate the weight for the both of them, but also like the energy in between, like whatever if your link is a bad one, then the energy is going to be leaking out and will make it heavier. And that whole kind of thing explained, just did a really good job to kind of reaffirm to the reader, like, hey, remember, this is how sympathy works. Oh, I really wanted to touch on this one. I like this whole discussion between the mayor and Quoth about inherent power and granted power. Granted power being that somebody has given you power, right? I think, granted power is the power that somebody gives you, and inherent power being something that you possess within yourself. And so I'm kind of interested to see what you thought on this, because they kind of argue about which is better.
That's right. Yeah, they have a whole discussion on that, and Kavoth has some clever retorts to the mayor, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Granted power being power that somebody has given you.
And the mayor likens that to granted power would be like, he has been granted power as the mayor, and because of that, if he needs one person to die, then he could send 10 men to go kill that person. Right. But if he were to try to kill that person by himself, it would just be him versus the other person, a lot less power.
Yes.
But Quoth argues that granted power has like a final line. Like, you can only go so far with granted power based on who you are, but inherent power, you can always learn more. You can always do more. The more you practice at something, the more powerful you can become at it. Mm-hmm. I really thought that was an interesting conversation, because the danger of granted power is that it can be taken away by someone in a higher station.
Yeah, right. And that's why I think, I'd have to side with Kavoth on this. If, inherent power is better, because no one can take that away from you, right?
Right.
Well, I guess they may in certain ways, depending on what we're talking about. But yeah, that granted power seems to have such limitations and the potential to lose it, right?
Yeah. It's a really interesting discussion. I would love to get like two philosophers in a room or something and hear their
hash
talk
it out
on this. Yeah. I like this quote that the mayor said about granted power. He says, sometimes they don't give it knowingly, sometimes they don't give it willingly, nevertheless all power. Mm-hmm. And so basically what I took it to mean is, even the people who don't know that they are helping his cause, even the people that are like below him, that are kind of in, whether it's through taxes or whatever else, they're supplying this power up the chain. They may not know exactly that they're giving power to the mayor, but nevertheless, at the end of the day, he's the one who ends up with it.
Yeah. Because he's at the top.
I just thought that was kind of an interesting quote. I won't spend too long on this, but I really loved Quoth and Denna's moonlit stroll through the garden, the mayor's garden.
Yeah.
It was kind of one of the few scenes that we've gotten where it's kind of this like romantic scene, like they're both opening.
There's some tension in there. Yeah,
exactly. And she asks him to put his arm around her. And then and at one point they're about to kiss, but then the mayor walks past them and like distracts them or whatever. But I really like this quote from Denna. And it says, "There are so many men, all endlessly attempting to sweep me off my feet. And then there is one of you trying just the opposite, making sure my feet are firm beneath me lest I fall." And this is right after, I think she like stumbled in the garden, and he just very carefully like grabbed her arm and brought her back into place and then let go. And it was, I really liked that moment, because not only was it like a great like romantic moment and stuff, but it just kind of shows Quoth's character, that he, for as much as he worries about being one of the 100 men that Denna has been with, I think he shows time and time again that he is simply not. You know, when she didn't trip, the narrative says he didn't, you know, grab her arm and then use that to kind of hang on to her arm for the rest of the walk, or bring her in close, or, you know, make a further move or anything. He grabbed her arm, moved her back into place so she could get her feet, and then let go. And I think that says so much about his character. And I'm not necessarily talking about propriety, like, oh, what a gentleman. I just mean that, like, you can kind of see where his, I guess, motivations are, or like what his goals are. Like, his goal isn't to, I'm sorry, I keep using this as an example, but his goal isn't to grab her arm and keep her there. His goal is to get her back to the point where she can walk herself.
Right.
And I just thought that was such a really, really great character moment. And then she also has this kind of funny, cute quote where she says, "There are 1,000 girls who will walk with you along moonlit paths, but there is only one who will hide in the shrubbery with you."
So are you becoming Team Denna then after this?
Honestly, not really. There's these moments where
she comes through, but
yeah, there's these moments in the book where I'm like, man, that was a really great moment with Denna, and I really appreciate like what Rothfuss did there, and kind of that gift he gave us, in the way I'm sure there's a ton of Denna and Quoth shippers, right? A lot of people want to see them together, and so he's kind of giving, I feel like he's kind of giving the fans that moment, which is really nice.
Teasing them.
Yeah, exactly. But overall, no, I really hate Denna. I really can't stand her. But yeah, there's this great quote. There's a Q&A with Patrick Rothfuss, and somebody asked him, what girl hurt you so badly that you created Denna?
I watched that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't really answer the question.
Yeah, he doesn't really answer it.
Well,
I think he does say, though, I promise you there is one. Like,
yes.
he says something like that. Like, yeah. There was this other thing I wanted to mention about the mayor, Denna, and Quoth that I thought was pretty funny, because they're always talking about this worn book that men use to, you know, woo the women with all these roses, right? She hates roses. And so
that's right.
Quoth at some point hears the mayor. I can't remember if the mayor wrote the song or if Quoth wrote the song for the mayor, and the song is called "Nothing But Roses for You."
Yes.
And he says, doesn't Quoth say like, I copied it down and played it for Denna, and we laughed ourselves sick. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember that. That is such a great inside joke. Like, everyone else thinks it's so romantic, and Jenna's like, oh my Lord.
Yeah. Is there any other moments that you would like to talk about? Any other favorite moments that you liked from this book before we kind of wrap it up here?
I think we covered a lot of great moments from this book. You know, I'll just say to anyone that's listening, there's so many moments that just bring a smile to your face, right? I mean, we just touched on a few. There's just so many meaningful interactions throughout this book that, I mean, throughout the series in general, right? That's just what makes me love them so much. But yeah, I think we covered a lot of good ones here. So I don't really have another one that pops into my mind that I need to talk about at the moment, I guess.
For sure. What before we go, you've looked into some theories and whatnot. What has been your favorite that you've read or watched on YouTube so far? Do you have a favorite theory?
Well, I guess there's sort of just finding out what's behind that the stone door, I suppose, has been the most enlightening. And how, some people think Jax is behind the stone door, right? The boy that stole the moon. So that was certainly an interesting theory, and sort of, like I said, it's hard when I first read these books. It's hard to get an idea of everything when you're reading through these for the first time, and so I mean, at least for me, it's kind of difficult to be able to form my own theories about what exactly is behind that and how it's all interconnected. But then I guess I want to say that the most interesting one is what Kvothe is doing at the Waystone Inn, right? There's a theory that he's setting a trap for the Chandrian. I'd say that's probably the most interesting to me. Is he really ahead of his game? Because we're led to believe that he's not at all on top of his game right now. So that's
and that's funny because it's been drilled into our heads that he is a trooper. He is the best actor ever, right? And so it makes you wonder if
is he performing the best, his best show ever, right? Or his best, his best scene. That's
So there's really only, I think, one theory that I want to touch on, because we're gonna have a whole episode dedicated to this in the future at some point. But I really I didn't at first, but the more I think about it, the more I buy into the theory that somehow, and I don't know how it all fits together, but somehow Kvothe is one of the Chandrian now. I think that he takes Cinder's place. I think he kills Cinder and has to take his place and is not happy about it. And so that's why he kind of locks himself away in the Waystone Inn. And I also kind of wonder with that, if we will find out that the Chandrian are actually the good guys and the Amir are actually the bad guys.
Right.
And I think kind of along with that, where Folly is gonna, the sword that he has, Folly,
right,
where that's gonna come from is, I think that somehow he is going to accidentally kill Denna. Maybe. Because I think she's going to get all entwined with this Chandrian and Amir thing. And as both of them get closer to the truth, but still misunderstood, I think that Denna is going to be the one who is right, and that Lanre was actually the hero, and that people have been twisting the stories to make the Chandrian seem like bad guys. And I would think that, just in my own future headcanon, like, as he's got this sword and as he goes to kill Cinder, Denna like steps in front or something. He accidentally kills Denna because she's trying to protect her patron. And so I don't know. I just have this feeling like, I feel like if Patrick were to do something like that, it would so perfectly put a twist on all of these books. And it would just be such like a wild realization. And it would be like a perfect, I kind of feel like it would be a perfect end to these books. All right. Well, this was a fantastic read. It was so much fun to go back over these books with you as you're going through it for the first time. And I'm sure you're looking forward to rereads in the future.
I already need to reread them. I mean, there's so much material.
Yeah, exactly.
Just finished them. I feel like I could reread them again. So yeah,
absolutely. And it's, there's so much that happens that even if you like, I've reread them just a couple months after reading it the first time, and I was like, oh yeah, this happened, and everything still feels really fresh, and I still laughed at all the same moments.
Right.
And these books are just so good for that. So yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining me for this, and
yeah, it was great
reading through these books with us. Like, this was seriously so much fun to see your reaction to these books.
Good. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I hope we get to do this for book 3 in our lifetime, but
yeah, for sure.
To joke.
Hopefully in the next like 2 to 3 years, that would be, dude, if it happened in the next 2 to 3 years, that would be
that'd be sweet.
So great. All right, guys. Well, that is going to wrap us up there. Thank you all for watching and joining us for our discussion of this amazing book and series. I believe our next episode might be a discussion of The Shadow Rising, the 4th book in the Wheel of Time series. And I believe I will have a special guest joining me for that one as well. As soon as Gabe is feeling better, we will do our podcast episode on the first 2 books in the Land series by Alaron Kong. Again, if you are a booktuber or a big fan of the Night Angel trilogy and want to come onto the podcast in March to talk about one or all of the books, please reach out. We're planning on making this a big event to talk about one of our top 5 favorite series of all time, and would love to collaborate with anybody who wants to join in. Don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons on your way out, and you can also follow us on Twitter @FilesFantasy. Until next time, Chris believes in man mothers. Chris believes in man mothers.
Thank you.
Hey, watch Yellow Jackets.
I will. I'll start.
Watch Yellow Jackets.
Okay.